Gentlemen, welcome to Crownhill Fort. In front of you we have a unique weapon which dates from the 1880s. Now, when the line of forts was constructed here at Plymouth, the main armament of the forts had not yet been decided. Obviously they needed weapons that could keep an enemy well away from the defensive line and so protect the dockyard. The guns that were in use at the time were mainly smoothbore guns. But by the 1860s, they had perfected the art of rifling guns, which could produce guns with a greater range and greater accuracy. The forts were constructed and completed by the 1870s, and still they hadn't decided what sort of weaponry to put into them. The first system they tried was to take old smoothbore guns and to line them to rifle them so they could use up existing stocks. And at that time, a certain captain in the Scottish militia thought that he could save the country a great deal of money by doing away with the forts themselves. What he proposed was that guns, instead of being mounted in forts, which would be great visible targets from a distance, could be concealed in pits. So a place such as Plymouth could have a ring of sunken pits surrounding it. When the enemy attacked, the guns could rise out of these pits, unseen until the point of firing, could fire off a shot and then recoil back in the pits again, where once more they would not present a target. He proposed this system and tried selling it to the government, but unfortunately the forts had already been built. So they weren't terribly interested, but he persevered with this idea. Again, he made modifications to his gun, and eventually they decided, just to appease him, they would put 14 of these guns on the defences of the United Kingdom, and they put some of them on an island in the Bristol Channel called Flatholm Island. They were in hidden batteries, so they could rise and fire at ships that were coming up the Severn and drop back down into their pits again where they couldn't be seen. Now, this Captain Scott Moncrieff still persisted in trying to sell his idea to the British government, because he thought he could save the government the huge expense of putting heavy armour into forts behind armoured shields, which were extremely expensive. He didn't succeed, but by the 1880s, the government, because he was a thorn in their side, decided that the 14 of these disappearing guns would be made for the Plymouth defences. What did the government do? They stuck them on the top of the forts where they were visible. So here we have a wonderful system of protecting a gun, but stuck on a visible feature, a fort, where the enemy would know the gun was. It's a Moncrieff disappearing gun. It's the second of his designs. It's a pattern 2 gun, and it has a 7-inch rifled breech loading gun mounted in it. The heaviest gun employed on this system was the 9-inch of 12 tons, and 2 of these were mounted on the defences of Fort Newhaven. They tried them, the military liked them, but unfortunately those that held the purse strings didn't like them. They thought they were too complicated, too prone to jamming. But we shall see during this drill how ingenious this system was. The gun is in the lower position at the moment, where it can't be seen by an enemy, and the idea was that it could be raised to the firing position. The crew were afforded great protection from incoming shot, because they could stand within the concrete emplacement and not be hit by direct fire. The gun would rise to the firing position, let off a round, and the force of the gun firing, the recoil of it, would raise the counterweight at the front, and it would drop down back into its hidden position again. Wonderful system, but certainly not designed to be mounted on a visible target such as a fort. There were 2 such guns mounted here in Crownhill Fort, and they were in use for training purposes right up until the turn of the century. Now, to fire the gun today, we've got a detachment that's come all the way from Fort Nelson, in one of the forts surrounding Portsmouth Harbour. They're the Portsdown Artillery volunteers, and you'll note from the red piping to their uniform that they are volunteer soldiers. They would have manned forts such as this in time of need to supplement the regular garrison artillery, who would wear the gold piping. They're the Portsdown Artillery volunteers. They're lined to the rear as a detachment.
Good.
And are under command of their number one. The first order issued tells these men off for their duties in this drill.
Stop! 1,
2, 3,
4,
5, 6, 7, 8.
Note they shout their gun numbers out, as well as the crew
Reproduction!
near the gun emplacement. There would be other gun numbers whose duties would be in the main magazine of the fort. There they would be employed in making up charges, fixing fuses into shells. The ammunition from the main magazine would be brought up onto the ramparts, where it would be stored locally in expense magazines. The ammunition came in two parts. There was the shell or projectile. It could be common shell for so-called common targets. It could be shrapnel for use against troops at intermediate ranges. It could be case shot against troops at very close ranges. And then there was the cartridge which propelled the projectile. This was normally black powder contained within a silk bag. The effective range of this particular gun was 4,000 yards, which was quite a good range. Now you'll note it's a breech loader. It was the first of the breech loaders, and it was loaded through a hollow breech screw in the rear. To close off the chamber from the loading breech screw at the rear is a heavy vent piece. The vent piece drops down in place and is held there by this screw, which is tightened up. Now, these guns were first issued to the Navy as broadside guns for ships such as HMS Warrior. But they found that they were very slow to load, and they were very prone to leakage around the vent piece. Also, the vent piece got very hot in action. In some circumstances, it was known for the vent piece to blow out, which was very deadly for the crew. So the Navy didn't like them very much, and they were therefore relegated to land defences where the muzzle velocity didn't matter. The muzzle velocity was the punching power of the gun, and the Navy needed a gun that could punch through armour plating on ships. With the forts, it wasn't so important, so the forts got these guns as flank defence weapons. The main armament of a fort such as this would be a much more powerful gun, a 64-pounder rifled muzzle loader on a high traversing platform. The gun's been loaded, the projectile's been inserted through the hollow breech screw, the cartridge has been placed in behind it, the vent piece dropped in place, and the gun's now ready for running up to the firing position. Now you'll note there's one man operating a brake cleaver to control the rate of descent. As the counterweight takes over, so the gun will rise up to its firing position, and at that point it will be visible by an enemy force. Of course, it was a bit simplistic to think that an enemy wouldn't know the number of guns in a fort such as this. Obviously they would. Therefore, it was rather pointless trying to hide them in pits such as this. Certainly, at this point, it would be visible from but at least the crew are well protected from incoming fire. The number one, the gun commander, mounts up onto the platform. At this point, he's very vulnerable to incoming fire, so he will not linger too long. He stands up there to sight his piece, using sights on the gun itself. This is known as laying it for line, and he can have the gun traversed around, hence these were known as traversing platforms. And the elevation of the barrel could be adjusted, which would affect the range. The other thing that affected the range was the size of the cartridge put in. The bigger the cartridge, the greater the range. Having now sighted his piece on enemy breaching batteries away in the distance, it's now made ready. In the vent piece is a hole. Into this hole is placed a copper friction tube filled with light pistol powder, and the lanyard is attached. When the lanyard is pulled, there'll be an explosion as the friction tube is ignited and the main charge goes off. So we'll await the command to fire when you'll hear a dull explosion. Note the smoke produced, that also gave away your position. The enemy could count the rising puffs of smoke from the ramparts and count the number of guns that you could bring to bear. Now, if a heavy projectile was fired with a full service charge, then that gun would have recoiled violently back down to its loading position, and would be locked down in the loading position, and then loaded and run back up to the firing position. However, no projectile has been fired because the McDonald's restaurant opposite would object somewhat. So it's still in the up position, and the crew will haul it back following this drill by hand so that it's ready for the next demonstration this afternoon. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that rather brief but quite spectacular demonstration of a unique piece of weaponry from the 1880s. The Portsdown Artillery volunteers fire quite a range of weaponry in their repertoire. They're quite proficient, as the true Victorian volunteer soldiers would have been, in firing a 16-pounder field gun, a 7-inch rifled breech loader on a casemate platform, a 64-pounder rifled muzzle loader on a blocked-up platform, 13-inch mortars, and 32-pounder smoothbore guns, of which you can see some examples in the main caponier here at Crownhill Fort, and they'll be demonstrated for you during your visit here today. At this point, it's safe if you want to come closer to the gun and look at it in more detail, talk to the crew at the finer points of about the finer points of their drill, ask them difficult and embarrassing questions like why do they look so scruffy with their braces hanging down like that. That's the favourite question they do like to answer, so don't disappoint them by not asking them why they've got their braces hanging down. What's the point in having braces if you don't use them, I ask myself. Well, do feel free to come forward now and talk to them and look at the gun in more detail. I hope you've enjoyed that, and do stay for the other gun firings here at Crownhill. Thank you very much.
Attachment on your left, our own Crownhill Fort gun team, and on your right, a gun team from Portsdown in Malta. Squad! Squad! Shoot!
Squad! Shoot!
The guns are about to fire for you, 22-pounder smoothbore breech loaders. A type of weapon invented purely for use in confined spaces of a caponier, such as this, the North or double caponier at Crownhill Fort. A caponier is nothing more than part of the fort that sticks up into the ditch to enable these guns to fire down the flanks of the fort. They fire a case shot, a canister full of 730 steel balls that upon firing would scatter down the ditch, killing or at least maiming any Frenchman foolish enough to attack the fort's walls. Luckily, the attack never did come, and the guns never were put to their ultimate test. By the 1890s, the drill of these guns had been perfected to such an extent that a well-trained gun detachment could fire one of these weapons once every 8 seconds, a phenomenal rate of fire for Victorian times. We're about to run through the drill now for you twice to give you an idea of the sights and sounds of the fort in action. It is loud when the guns go off. However, there's no need to put your fingers in your ears. If you just hold your mouths slightly open, all will be okay. Come on! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6!
Number 2 gun, now!
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6! Prepare for action!
Here goes, prepare for action!
Examine! Gun!
Gun!
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that demonstration of the sights, the sounds and the smells of Victorian artillery in action. Please do come and chat to the gun teams once they've been dismissed for any questions you may have. We'll be more than happy to answer your queries. And maybe we'll see you again in an hour's time under the manteltops to show you another attachment from Portsdown to Victorian artillery.
Attachment to the rear of their gun.
Good. Cut. Turn off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Note they shout their gun number out, as well as the gun crew here on the gun floor. There will be
Reproduction.
other gun numbers away in the main magazines of the fort. In the main magazine, their duties would involve filling cartridges with black powder, fixing fuses into the shells. The cartridges would be dispatched from the main magazine in time of need and would be stored in nearby magazines known as expense magazines, ready-use magazines. And likewise, ready-use shell stores, expense shell stores up on the ramparts here, would have 100 rounds per gun stored in time of need. Only when shell and cartridge were put into the bore of the gun would the two meet for safety reasons. Now you'll notice a breech loader. It's got a heavy breech screw which is hollow. This is unscrewed to release a large vent piece which seals the gun chamber from the breech.